Hello there, Mr. Mesh here. I hope you're well. Mr. Mesh is good as always. Welcome to this interesting topic on the Keynesian models. Very interesting. It's quite exciting stuff. I hope you guys enjoy this. The Keynesian models have informed macroeconomic policy for quite some time now. And you can appreciate the complexity of the macroeconomy. There are just too many variables involved, and policymakers need to understand how these variables are related. We are going to get right into it, and I have split this section into 5 parts. I'm going to break it down starting with a very simple model. So in this section, we are going to discuss the simple Keynesian model. We are going to build from there. All right. There's always been this battle of ideas between what are referred to as classical economists and Keynesians. And these classical economists have their father as Adam Smith. You should check out his book, very interesting, on the Wealth of Nations. Which he wrote in support of a free market. And then this Keynesian school of economic thinking has its father as John Maynard Keynes. And John Maynard Keynes has one of his main papers was on the simple theory of interest. So you should also check out that paper, which has informed a lot of his thinking. With classical economists, they believe in a free market. These guys, they believe in a free market. And the Keynesians, they believe that the government has to intervene to improve economic outcomes. All right. So one of the classical economists argued that supply creates demand. So one of the classical economists says supply creates demand. And this is referred to as Say's law. This is referred to as Say's law. The economist responsible for this kind of thinking, his name was Jean-Baptiste Say. But during the Great Depression in the mid-1930s in America, people argued against this. This is when John Keynes came in and said, no. It's actually the other way around. Demand is the one that should create supply. So the whole idea behind the Keynesian model is that if there's enough demand in an economy, output is going to increase. And total demand in an economy, you will remember from previous sections that the total demand in the economy is given by the consumption from households, investments from firms, spending by the government, and spending in the foreign sector. Okay, so these are 4 sectors that we are going to focus on throughout this 5-part series. The 4 sectors where this is consumption by households, right? These are households. Investments, these are firms. Spending by the government, this is the government. And this is the foreign sector. These are actually referred to as net exports. And this happens in the foreign sector where we interact with other countries. In the simple Keynesian model, I'm going to ignore this. This is to make things simpler so that you get the idea of where we are going. I'm going to ignore government expenditure and the foreign sector. I'm going to ignore these 2 sectors. At the initial explanation, I'll focus on consumption. I'm going to focus on households. Then soon after that, I'm going to add the firms. All right. We are going to see, I might use certain words interchangeably. Remember, your aggregate demand is talking about the total spending by different sectors in the economy. So this aggregate demand can also be referred to aggregate expenditure. The word aggregate means total. So aggregate demand can also be referred to as aggregate expenditure. If I write AE, just know that I'm talking about the total spending. This is total spending in an economy. This is total spending. All right. And this total spending in an economy can also be referred to as the GDP. Always remember there are three ways in which GDP is calculated. The GDP, which is the output produced in an economy, the value of the final output. There is the expenditure approach. That's one approach, the expenditure approach. Okay, the expenditure approach. So when I say total spending, I'm also referring to GDP. The second approach is the income approach, where you sum up all the income from factors of production, your wages, your interest, your rent, your profits. That is the income approach. So when I talk about income, I'm also referring to your GDP, and the other approach is the output approach. All right, so these words can be used interchangeably to refer to the gross domestic product of an economy, where your expenditure is the total spending, your income is the income from all factors of production, and your output is the value of the final product, or the gross value added at each stage in the production process. All right, so understand these terms, and you see that at times we might use these terms interchangeably. Right. Let's start with our simple Keynesian model, where we have said that aggregate spending, your total spending, aggregate expenditure. In this instance, we are going to assume that your aggregate expenditure is equal to consumption. So we are considering one sector where we only have households. We are going to ignore everything else, the firms, the government, and the foreign sector. We just consider consumption. This consumption is split into two. We argue that your consumption is given by autonomous consumption plus induced consumption. All right. So this first part of consumption is said to be autonomous. What does this mean? This means that there's a part of household consumption which is independent of the level of income. You see, this C bar is actually going to be the same even when income is zero. When your income is zero, this doesn't change. If you are to show this on a graph, on a consumption graph, it's going to be like this. This is consumption, this is the level of income. No matter how much income you have in the economy, the autonomous consumption remains fixed. This is autonomous consumption. It doesn't change. It is independent of the level of income, autonomous. This second part here, with the small c times y is income, this is referred to as induced consumption. So this is referred to as induced consumption. What we are saying is this part of consumption is induced by the level of income. When your income is zero, the consumption is here. As your income increases, the total consumption is going to increase. So your consumption function is going to look like this, where your consumption is the autonomous consumption, which is independent of income. This can be savings, this can be inheritance, this can be you are going to eat even if you're not working. So we assume that this is going to be fixed. Even when you have an income of zero, you're still going to spend. Then you add your small c times the level of income. This is induced, this is autonomous. All right. This small letter c is called the marginal propensity to consume. marginal propensity to consume. I'm going to write this as small letter as MPC going forward, or even if I just simply put a small letter C, just know that I'm referring to the marginal propensity to consume. What does this mean? The marginal propensity to consume is simply talking about whenever you get income, how much of that additional income are you going to eat? How much of that additional income are you going to spend? All right. So your marginal propensity to consume is talking about how much more do you consume, the change in consumption, when your income has changed by a certain amount. For instance, let's say, e.g., if your marginal propensity to consume is 0.8, let's say it's 0.8, what this means is that for every dollar that you get, you're going to eat 80 cents. You're going to eat 80 cents. That's what 0.8 means. And we make this assumption that all the money that you have, all the income that you have, you're either going to eat it to consume or you're going to save it. So the total income is given by the consumption and the savings. So of the 80 cents, of the $1, if your marginal propensity to consume is 80 cents, what it means is the remainder 20 cents you're going to save it. So the marginal propensity to save, which is how much you save for every extra income that you get, marginal propensity to save, in this instance is going to be 1 minus 0.8, which is 0.2. So the sum of the two, marginal propensity to save plus the marginal propensity to consume, has to be 1. The sum of these two has to be 1. Either you are consuming all your income or you are saving it. If you consume part of it, you save it. These two, consumption and savings, equal your total income. And the marginal propensity to consume then becomes the slope of this consumption line. See, the slope of a line, you should remember this, that the slope of a line is the change in y over the change in x. Our x here is the income and our y is the c. So the change in c over change in y, the slope here is the MPC, the marginal propensity to consume. Make sure you do not forget, this is very important. And we assume this is the same for everyone in the economy. We know that's not true, but we assume an average MPC for everyone in the economy. All right, let's look at this simple example here. Gabriel has a disposable income that increases from 2,000 to 2,500. As a result, his savings increase from 300 to 450. Calculate the marginal propensity to consume. All right, you can do this in two ways, and I'm going to quickly do this in two ways, right? Because you are given savings here, it will be easier to calculate the marginal propensity to save, which is the change in savings divided by the change in income, right? The change in savings is just taking the new savings minus the original savings, and then you divide by the new income minus the original income. So your marginal propensity to save in this instance, the new savings are 450, the original savings are 300. You divide this by the income. The new income is 2,500 minus the original income is 2,000. Okay, then you subtract this. 450 minus 300 should be 150, and 2,500 minus 2,000, it's 500. All right, you put this in your calculator, and then you're going to get the marginal propensity to save being equal to 0.3. The question is asking for the marginal propensity to consume. your marginal propensity to consume is equal to 1 minus the marginal propensity to save, which is 1 minus 0.3, which should be 0.7. That's one way to do this, right? Alternatively, you could try and get the consumption first, because remember, your total income is savings plus consumption. If you make consumption the subject of the formula here, what you're going to get is that your consumption is equal to income minus the savings. All right. So initially, the consumption is this income of 2,000 minus the savings of 2,000 minus the savings of 300. You get 1,700. Then you do the same thing when there's a change now, the second consumption. It's now 2,500 minus the savings of 450. Okay, you say 2,500 minus the savings of 450, you get 2,050. All right. Hence, to get the marginal propensity to consume, it's the change in consumption over the change in income. The change in consumption is going to be 2,050 minus 1,700. Then the change in income is the same as here, because it's just 2,500 minus 2,000. So you are going to then have your marginal propensity to consume as being equal to 2,050 minus 1,700 you get 350. You divide that by 500, and then you 350 divided by 500, it should give you the same answer here, which is 0.7. So you pick the approach that you are going to find simpler for you. Whatever you feel is easier for you, you use that one. All right. And then, so this is one when you are given a text, but when you are given a graph like this, and your consumption function, this is consumption. If your consumption function is given to you like this is your consumption function. And this here, let me use a different color so that you don't get confused or lost in the text. Let's say here you are given 800. Remember, the intercept here is our autonomous consumption. Okay? This is our autonomous consumption. And then you are also to show equilibrium. I'm going to explain this further, but at equilibrium you have to use the 45-degree line. You have to use the 45-degree line, which looks like this. This is a 45-degree line, and the 45-degree line shows equilibrium. It's points where the aggregate expenditure, total spending, is equal to the level of income, right? If for this economy, for example, the equilibrium level of consumption is 3,200. This is all the information they are going to give you, and then they ask you to calculate the marginal propensity to consume. Remember, I said the marginal propensity to consume in this instance should be the slope of this line here. This is the consumption line, which is autonomous and induced consumption. To get the slope of this line, it's the change in consumption and change in income. This is the line of equilibrium. So which means at this point, the consumption here, this consumption here is equal to the income. C equals Y here. So this is 3,200 here. So the change in Y, this is our change in Y, which is 3,200 minus 800 over the change in X, this 3,200 minus 0, because it's all the way from here to there. So You then solve this. 3,200 minus 800. You get 2,400. And then you divide this by 3,200. You must get 0.75. Remember, your MPC has to always be between 1 and 0. Once you get your marginal propensity to consume, the marginal propensity to save is easy now. It's just 1 minus MPC. So it becomes 0.25. All right. So if you don't understand what I just said, because it might be a bit fast, but pause this video, go back and try do this again. I'm going to make separate videos, 2 of them, to focus on calculations, but this is the basic stuff that you must understand. This is this is what you are going to build on. So understand this before going any further. All right, let's move on to the next part. Now, what we are going to do in this part is that I'm going to include, I'm going to add the firms, the third sector, which is the second sector, which is the firms, and what this means is that the aggregate expenditure now is given by 2 sectors: households, consumption, and investments by firms. Once we have investments by firms, things are going to change now, right? Remember, the consumption by households, always remember that the consumption by households is going to be given by autonomous. There's an autonomous component, and then there's an induced component. So this is what we have here. So this is this. So basically what I'm saying is aggregate spending is C bar plus CY plus I. Okay, which is I've simply written here. We're going to get back to this expression when I show you how we get the equilibrium. But remember, we said consumption would be given by, we have in this y-axis, it's now the total spending, which is A. This remains the level of output Y. We draw our line of equilibrium, the 45-degree line. We draw the 45-degree line like this. This is our line of equilibrium, which is the 45-degree line. And along this line, the aggregate expenditure is equal to the level of output, right? The consumption function, we said was drawn by this, and this is the autonomous consumption. This is autonomous. The consumption function would look something like this, where consumption is equal to the autonomous part plus the induced part. Now, if we include investments now, throughout this course, we're going to assume that investments are autonomous, right? So if investments are there, this shifts. Any change in autonomous expenditure shifts the total spending line upwards, so that you have the autonomous consumption plus investments. So your total spending line is going to now look like this. And this now is not just C, but the total spending is now your consumption plus investment. So there's a shift out upwards because of autonomous expenditure. So the equilibrium, this point here, initially this was the equilibrium level of income, but it shifts here to the new equilibrium 2. So this is our first equilibrium, this is our second equilibrium. All right, the shift from equilibrium 1 to equilibrium 2, you're going to see that our change in autonomous expenditure, if you look at this graph, is smaller than the change in the equilibrium level of output. So the change in output from a small change in equilibrium in autonomous expenditure is what we refer to as the multiplier effect. That's what we refer to as the multiplier effect. What you are basically saying is this. You remember we spoke about the three major flows in the economy, which were production, income, spending. So what is happening in this case is that because of an increase in investment, there's going to be an increase in expenditure, so spending goes up here. So there is increase in income, which increases expenditure. As expenditure increases, the output is going to increase. They're going to be producing more, so there's an increase in output. Because output is increasing, people's incomes are going to increase because you need people to do the production and you pay them. And remember also its own figures of production, that also increases the spending. And as the spending increases, that also increases production until you get to equilibrium. Hence, we refer to this as the multiplier effect. All right, that is the multiplier effect. So basically, when you talk about the multiplier, we are generally, I'm going to use alpha to represent our multiplier. Generally, we are saying, when you talk about the multiplier, we are looking at by how much your total income is going to change when there's been a change in aggregate expenditure. So the change in income over the change in autonomous expenditure is going to give you the multiplier. This is the multiplier. Remember, I'm using alpha to represent the multiplier. Okay. Take note of this formula. Take note of this formula, the multiplier formula. The multiplier is determined by the level of the marginal propensity to consume. Okay. So I want you to look at this. Remember, we said the multiplier is just the change in income over the change in aggregate expenditure. You could calculate the multiplier using the marginal propensity to consume. So it's generally 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. Remember, the marginal propensity to consume plus the marginal propensity to save is equals to 1. So you could write this formula as simply 1 over the marginal propensity to save. All right, that's how you can calculate this. Keynes said demand creates supply. Remember when you compared Keynes and Say. Now, the higher the MPC, if people are willing to consume more of their income, what that means is that there's going to be a creation of more products and an increase in the total spending of the economy, and then an increase in the GDP. For instance, if your marginal propensity to consume is very low, let's say it's 0.1, the multiplier in this instance is going to be 1 over 1 minus 0.1, which is 1 over 0.9. If you put this into your calculator, you must get 1 divided by 0.9, it should be 1.11. That's a small multiplier, it's quite small. But if you multiply, if your marginal propensity to consume is, say, let's say your marginal propensity to consume is equal to 0.9, which is quite big. You are spending 90 cents on every dollar. If you get $100, you eat $90 and only save $10. Your multiplier is going to be 1 over 1 minus 0.9, which is equals to 1 over 0.1, which is 10. So the change in autonomous consumption or spending is going to be multiplied 10 times. In this case, it's only multiplied 1.1 times. This is not a very big difference, but 10 times is quite big. So when the MPC is big, what that means is that the multiplier is going to be big. There's going to be a lot of economic activity generated. Now, how then do we use this to calculate the equilibrium? All right, this is quite important. So let me just clear this part here, and I want to use this space to show you mathematically how we get the equilibrium level of income. All right, now our total spending is given by two sectors, households and firms, and the household's consumption is split into two parts. It's split into autonomous and induced consumption, where this is the marginal propensity to consume, this is the level of income. So the total spending can then be written as autonomous consumption plus induced consumption plus investments, which are autonomous. Remember, consumption is an autonomous part, investments are autonomous. Autonomous, remember, this also means that independent of income. So our investments do not depend on the level of income. At equilibrium, in equilibrium, the total spending, aggregate expenditure, is equal to the level of income. So we substitute this y, this a with y. So we remove a, we put y. We have C bar plus the marginal propensity to consume plus I. We put our like terms together, this y and this y, we put them together. So y minus the marginal propensity to consume times income is equal to autonomous consumption plus autonomous investments, right? We factor out our y, so the y 1 minus c is equal to autonomous expenditure, and then we divide both sides. So the equilibrium level of income is therefore 1 over 1 minus c multiplied by the total autonomous expenditure. This is actually investments. Sorry about that. This is investments. All right. So investments which are autonomous. Okay. So you see, remember, this is the multiplier. This is the formula for the multiplier. So this is the multiplier, and this is the total autonomous expenditure. I will use A bar to mean autonomous expenditure. At any level, or no matter how many sectors you have, I want you to know this, that the equilibrium level of income is always going to be given by the multiplier times the total autonomous expenditure. This is always going to be the case regardless of how many sectors you have in that economy. So we are going to write this formula down, keep it. The multiplier might be different, the total autonomous expenditure might be different, but at the end of the day, to finally get the equilibrium level of income, you must multiply whatever multiplier that you have. Whatever multiplier that you have, you must multiply it with the total autonomous expenditure. That's how you get the equilibrium level of income in a Keynesian model. I hope you guys enjoyed this introduction. I like to keep my videos short, so if you don't understand some stuff, pause the video, go back. Feel free to reach out to us on WhatsApp or via email, and we can assist you further. But until then, you guys must enjoy economics. Mr. Mesh is out. Peace.